The night was heavy with rain, Lagos thunder rolling like an angry god outside the pristine walls of St. Nicholas Hospital. Inside a private maternity ward reserved only for the city's richest and most powerful, the silence was broken only by the faint beeping of monitors and the soft, ragged breathing of a woman who had just brought life into the world. Her name was Funk Adeyemi. She was 42, fragile and radiant all at once, her face slick with sweat, her body trembling from the hours of pain. And yet, as she held the tiny boy pressed against her chest, her lips curved into the kind of smile she had not worn in years, pure, unguarded joy. She whispered to the infant, her voice cracking, "My son, my miracle, my proof." For 15 long years, Funk had known nothing but waiting. Waiting for a miracle. Waiting for a husband who never touched her. Waiting for the cruel words of her mother-in-law to end. Now, as the child squirmed in her arms, small fists clenched as if ready to fight the world, she believed for the first time that maybe God had not abandoned her after all. But miracles come at a cost. Across the room, standing near the window, Chief Femi Adeyemi, her husband, watched silently. His face was a perfect mask, calm and unreadable, though his heart pounded with a rage and shame he dared not show. In Lagos, appearances were everything. He was heir to one of the city's most powerful old money families, his father a kingmaker, his lineage intertwined with politics and business. For 10 years, whispers had haunted their household. A barren wife, an empty cradle, a cursed womb. And now, suddenly, here was a child, a son, his heir. But Chief Femi knew the truth. He had not lain with his wife in over 7 years. Their marriage bed had grown as cold as the marble floors of their Ikoyi mansion. Funk was a beautiful woman, yes, but beauty did not stir him. He had taken comfort in mistresses, dancers, and high-class escorts, and still none had borne him a child. Deep down, he feared the shameful truth that the problem was not Funk, but him. So how was she holding a child now? He did not need to ask. He had noticed the subtle shifts, the way Funk's eyes avoided his, the glow on her face months earlier when she had announced her pregnancy. He knew, though she never confessed, that the father of this child was not him. It was Kunal, the gate man, a poor boy from Osun with a quiet strength, dark skin glistening under the sun as he opened the mansion's gate each morning. Femi had seen the way Funk sometimes looked at him, not with lust at first, but with something even more dangerous: attention, gratitude, warmth. In her loneliness, she had reached for the one man who treated her as a woman, not as a failure. Now that sin was breathing in her arms, a living, undeniable proof of betrayal. And yet, as the first wave of visitors stormed the hospital the following morning, bearing flowers, champagne, and prayers, Chief Femi smiled. He posed for photographs beside his wife, holding the child as though it were his own. To Lagos society, nothing else mattered. Their dynasty had its heir. "God is good," his mother proclaimed loudly, her heavily beaded head ties swaying as she raised her hands in thanksgiving. "After 15 years, the womb has opened. My son is truly blessed." Funk lowered her head humbly, tears burning her eyes. She dared not meet her husband's gaze, for she knew if she did, she would see the storm gathering there. In the quiet of the night, when nurses had gone and even the baby slept, Funk lay awake, her mind drifting to the years that had led her here. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of emptiness. She remembered her wedding day, lavish, extravagant, a union of two powerful families. The press had called it the event of the year. She had been 27, hopeful, full of dreams of a large family. Femi was handsome, tall, with a voice that commanded attention. She thought she was marrying a man who would love her. Instead, she married into a prison made of wealth. The early years were filled with questions. When will you give us a child? Is there a problem? Doctors. Fertility treatments. Prayers at church vigils. Anointed oils. Prophets declaring visions. Nothing. Her mother-in-law's words cut deepest. If a tree does not bear fruit, why waste the soil? Femi had grown colder, distant. Their marital bed became a barren desert. At first, he claimed stress. Then work. Soon he simply stopped coming home at night. When he did, he smelled of perfume that was not hers. Funk had cried herself to sleep for years. Until one evening, broken from yet another humiliating family dinner where her barrenness was discussed as though she were absent, she had walked out into the garden. And there, by the gate, Connell had looked at her with eyes that did not judge. He had not meant to become her savior. But when his calloused hands brushed against hers, when his lips finally touched her skin, she felt something she thought she would never feel again, wanted. One night became 2. Then 10. Then months of secret, stolen passion. And when her belly swelled, she told herself it was destiny. Proof that she was never barren. Now, lying in the hospital bed, she stroked her newborn's cheek and whispered, "Temi, my Temitope, you are my redemption." The night before Funk was discharged, Connell came. He stood outside the hospital, rain soaking his shirt, his heart torn between pride and fear. He had waited in the shadows until Femi's driver finally left. Then, slipping past unnoticed, he entered the private ward. Funk gasped when she saw him. Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but he shook his head. I just wanted to see him one last time," he whispered. She lifted the baby gently, cradling him toward Connell. His hands trembled as he touched the boy's tiny fingers, felt the fragile heartbeat against his chest. "My son," he breathed, a single tear running down his cheek. "My blood." Funk sobbed softly, clutching his arm. "I don't want this to be goodbye." But it had to be. The door opened, and Chief Femi entered, his presence filling the room like a shadow. His voice was cold, precise. "You have seen the child. Now you will leave." Connell turned, defiance flashing in his eyes. For a moment, Femi thought he might refuse. But then the younger man lowered his head. Femi handed him an envelope. Thick, heavy, filled with crisp banknotes. 10 million naira. "You will take this and disappear," Femi said. "Do not come back. Do not call. Do not write. If you ever breathe a word of this, you will regret it." Connell looked at Funk one last time, pain etched across his face. Then he walked out into the rain, clutching both the envelope and the memory of the son he could not claim. Funk pressed the baby against her chest, her body shaking with silent sobs. Days later, the Ikoyi mansion erupted in celebration. Musicians played, politicians toasted, and society women gushed over the child. Temitope Adeyemi, the miracle heir, was christened with champagne and holy water. Everywhere Funk turned, people praised her. She smiled and nodded, but deep inside, guilt clawed at her. Femi remained stoic, his pride a mask of steel. He introduced the boy as his son, his heir, his legacy. But in his private moments, when no one was watching, he would stare at the child with a mix of love and hatred, knowing the truth but unable to face the shame of it. The dynasty had its heir, but beneath the surface, secrets festered like a wound. Funk knew that one day, the truth might surface. But for now, as she watched Temi sleep peacefully in his cradle, she let herself believe in the miracle, even if it was built on lies. Because for the first time in 15 years, she was no longer just the barren wife. She was a mother, and nothing could take that away from her. The Ikoyi mansion glittered like a palace under the Lagos sun. Chandeliers caught the light spilling from enormous French windows, their crystals scattering rainbows across polished marble floors. Outside, a fleet of black SUVs and exotic cars lined the street. The Adeyemi residence was no stranger to extravagance, but today, it outshone even itself. It was Temitope's first birthday. In a society where appearances were everything, the Adeyemis had no choice but to host a celebration befitting the miracle child. Guests flowed in like royalty, politicians with their security convoys, business tycoons in agbadas woven with gold thread, society women in geli so high they seemed to defy gravity. Photographers darted around, eager to capture every glittering detail for the society pages. Funk, dressed in white lace with pearls at her neck, held her son close as people swarmed her with compliments. "Ah, he's so handsome. Truly, God has blessed you. This boy will be great, just like his father." She smiled politely, nodding at each remark, though every father reference pierced her like a blade. She kept her gaze low, cradling Temi protectively, as if shielding him from the lies that surrounded his very existence. At the center of it all stood Chief Femi Adeyemi. Regal in his embroidered agbada, he moved among the guests like a king surveying his court. He raised glasses of champagne, laughed loudly, clapped backs, and reminded everyone that the Adeyemi dynasty was alive and secure. But beneath the polished exterior, his heart was a restless storm. This boy, this heir that everyone praised, was not his. The party rolled on with music, laughter, and the endless click of cameras. A high-life band played live on the manicured lawn while waiters glided through the crowd with trays of jollof rice, peppered goat meat, and champagne flutes. Even the governor stopped by briefly, holding Temi aloft for a photo before sweeping away with his entourage. To Lagos society, the day was a triumph. To Funk, it was a performance. To Femi, it was survival. Far from the glitter of Ikoyi, in the bustling heart of London, Kunal sat in a cramped university library surrounded by textbooks and a flickering laptop. It had been a year since he last saw his son, since that night when Chief Femi handed him an envelope thick with naira and ordered him away. 10 million had seemed like a fortune at the time. But Kunal had not wasted it. He invested carefully, tuition fees first, then living expenses, and finally into the dream he had carried since boyhood, technology. Nights were spent coding, days balancing odd jobs with lectures. He struggled, failed, lost money, tried again. When loneliness struck, he thought of his son. When exhaustion nearly broke him, he remembered the weight of that tiny hand curled around his finger. He had promised himself that one day, the child would be proud to call him father. By the time Temi was 3, Kunal had graduated with honors. By 5, he had launched his first tech venture. By 10, he was a rising star in African technology, his startup developing educational software and winning small contracts across schools in Ghana and Nigeria. He never once returned to Ikoyi. But the memory of that house, the gates he once opened, the family he once served, never left him. The years moved like shadows across water. Temi was 11 now, bright, curious, and endlessly questioning. He had grown into a sharp-eyed boy with his mother's delicate features and Kunal's strong jawline. Funk doted on him endlessly, while Femi provided everything wealth could buy: private tutors, expensive toys, chauffeurs, nannies. And yet, Temi always felt something missing. His father rarely spoke to him except in public. Their relationship was one of obligation, not warmth. Chief Femi loved the boy in his way, but it was a love tinged with resentment, a reminder of a wound he could never confess. So when Temi's school announced they were partnering with a new technology company to improve learning, no one imagined the storm that was coming. The company's name, Horizon Tech. Its founder, Kunal Adebayo. The unveiling took place in the school's assembly hall. Parents and dignitaries filled the space as teachers explained the groundbreaking software that would revolutionize education. Temi, seated among his classmates, listened with wide eyes. When the guest speaker finally took the stage, Temi's heart skipped. Kunal walked with quiet confidence. No longer the gate man in faded uniforms, he was dressed in a tailored navy blue suit. His voice was deep, calm, steady as he spoke about the future of learning in Africa. He spoke of children as leaders, of education as freedom, of technology as power. Temi was captivated. After the event, as students swarmed around the demonstration booths, Temi found himself face to face with the man. "Hello, young man," Kunal said warmly, kneeling slightly to meet his eyes. "What do you think about all this?" Temi grinned. "It's amazing. I like computers a lot. Sometimes I even fix my friends' tablets when they crash." Kunal chuckled softly. "Smart boy. What's your name?" "Temitope. But everyone calls me Temi." Kunal froze. The name struck him like lightning. His gaze flicked over the boy's face, his sharp cheekbones, the arch of his brows, the curious spark in his eyes. For a moment, Kunal felt the world stop moving. He knew. Every instinct screamed the truth. This was his son. That night, Kunal sat alone in his hotel room staring at the ceiling. He replayed every detail, the boy's face, his voice, his laugh. There was no doubt. Temi was his blood. He felt a rush of pride so strong it almost choked him. His son was alive, thriving, brilliant. But beneath the joy, fear simmered. The Adeyemi name was powerful. Femi was ruthless. And Funk, did she even still think of him? Kunnel's hands shook as he picked up his phone. 4 hours he debated. Finally, with a deep breath, he dialed a number he had memorized years ago but never used. When Funk answered, her voice was cautious. "Hello." Silence. Then a tremor. "It's me." Her breath caught. She nearly dropped the phone. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then tears filled her eyes. "Kunnel," she whispered. "Yes. I saw him today." "Funk, I saw our son." Her world spun. She had built 10 years of silence around her secret, but in a single sentence it cracked open. Her chest ached with both terror and relief. "Kunnel, you shouldn't have called. If Femi finds out." "I don't care about Femi. I only care about the boy. Funk, he's brilliant. He's just like me." Funk sobbed quietly, pressing a hand to her mouth to keep from waking Temi. Against her will, pride swelled in her chest. Kunnel was no longer the gate man she once pitied. He had become everything he promised. Over the next months, Kunnel found ways to remain close without exposing the truth. He mentored Temi at school, guided him in coding clubs, encouraged his curiosity. Teachers noticed the boy blossoming. Temi adored him. Here was a man who listened, who laughed at his jokes, who believed in his ideas. In time, Temi began to confide in him more than in his father. Funk watched from a distance, her heart torn. She should have been terrified. And yet, she was grateful. For the first time in his life, her son had a father who truly cared. Meanwhile, Chief Femi remained distracted with business and politics, his appearances in Temi's life limited to ceremonies and photographs. He never noticed the growing bond between his son and the stranger from Osun who now stood tall among Lagos elites. But others began to. Teachers whispered. Some parents raised eyebrows. The resemblance was uncanny. The years slipped by again. Temi thrived under Kunnel's mentorship. He became the star of his school, winning competitions, excelling in tech, admired by peers and teachers alike. By the time his 17th birthday approached, whispers had become harder to ignore. More than one person had asked Funk quietly, "Doesn't he look just like that Kunnel Adebayo?" She would smile tightly, deflect, and change the subject. But at night, she lay awake in fear. Kunnel, too, felt the risk rising. Yet he could not stay away. Temi was not just a project or a protege, he was his blood. The boy himself had begun to notice. Why did his mentor seem to understand him more than anyone else? Why did people sometimes glance between them with knowing looks? The truth was circling closer, like a hawk above prey. And soon it would strike. The years had a way of stretching and shrinking at the same time. To Funk, the decade since Temi's birth felt like a lifetime. From the hushed whispers of her in-laws, to the gossiping circles of Lagos women, to the constant facade she maintained beside her husband at charity galas and high society weddings, her life had been a carefully balanced stage play. Every smile rehearsed, every word monitored. She was the miracle mother. The woman who endured and was rewarded. But deep down, her miracle wasn't what the world thought it was. And now, standing outside the lush boarding school gates where Temi's future was being carved, she couldn't shake the shadow of the past that had suddenly returned. Kunnel. Temi thrived in boarding school. He was curious, ambitious, and restless in a way that made teachers both adore and fear him. He asked questions no one could answer easily. He dismantled gadgets just to understand their insides. He had a sharp tongue too, polite but cutting, much like Chief Femi's in his younger days. But unlike Femi, there was warmth in him. An unteachable empathy. It was what drew Kunnel's eye the first time he saw Temi during the school's official tech rollout. The boy had volunteered to test the new interactive learning platform, and while others fumbled, Temi breezed through the trial. Kunnel remembered staring at him for too long, the faint ache in his chest when he noticed how the boy's smile curved just like his own. Later, in casual conversation, Kunnel had asked Temi a few questions. His answers were bright, thoughtful, and something inside Kunnel whispered, "He is mine." That is my blood. When Kunnel reached out to Funk weeks later, she froze. She hadn't heard his voice in years. Madame Funk, he said softly over the phone, his voice older now, steadier. It's me, Kunnel. For a long silence, she couldn't speak. All she could hear was her heartbeat pounding against her ribs. They agreed to meet in a quiet cafe in Lekki. When she arrived, she barely recognized him. The boyish gateman had vanished. In his place was a man in his mid-30s, dressed in a crisp suit, carrying himself with the ease of success. His beard was neatly trimmed, his accent tinged with foreign polish. She almost cried. "Kunnel," she whispered. He smiled gently. "I told you I would not waste the chance, Ma. That money, it became my foundation. I studied abroad. I built a company. And by God's grace, I am here now, not as your gate man, but as someone who can look you in the eye." Funk struggled to hold back her tears. "And you saw him, Temi?" "Yes," Kunnel said. His voice softened. "The moment I saw him, I knew. That boy is mine." She looked around nervously, afraid someone would overhear. "Kunnel, you must be careful. If Femi ever—" Kunnel interrupted gently. "I don't want to expose him. I don't want scandal. I just want to be near my son, even if from a distance." And in that moment, Funk knew, life had grown complicated again. Over the next few years, Kunnel became more visible in Temi's world. As the CEO of the tech company powering the school's digital systems, he had frequent reasons to visit. Teachers noticed how Temi gravitated towards him. The boy would always find his way into Kunnel's presentations, asking questions, shadowing his explanations, wanting to learn. Sometimes, when they spoke privately, Kunnel would tell him stories, not about wealth or success, but about struggle, resilience, and how a poor man could turn life around with courage. Temi listened wide-eyed, hungry for every word. "You remind me of myself," Kunnel often said with a smile. "But smarter. Much smarter." Temi glowed under that praise. Praise he rarely got from his father. Chief Femi, by now, was distant. He loved Temi, yes, but in a possessive, detached way. His empire consumed him. His mistresses still lingered. And though he provided the best life money could buy, he was never fully present. In quiet moments, Funk watched with guilt as Kunnel stepped into the role her husband refused to fill, guiding Temi, inspiring him, giving him something money could never purchase, a sense of belonging. But secrets are like smoke. No matter how tightly you close the windows, they find their way through cracks. Funk began to notice little things. Temi once came home from school and said, "Mum, Mr. Kunnel told me he grew up in Osen. That's where your grandmother is from, right? Isn't that funny?" Her heart skipped. Another time, Temi said, "Mum, people always say I don't look like Dad. But Mr. Kunnel says I have strong eyes. Do you think so too?" Funk forced a laugh, but inside, terror gnawed at her. What if he discovered the truth? What if Kunnel, despite his promises, slipped? And then there was Femi. Sharp-eyed, calculating Femi. He had always been suspicious by nature. Though he had buried the scandal years ago, Funk sometimes caught him watching her strangely, as though measuring her guilt. By 16, Temi was the star of his school. Brilliant, athletic, confident. Teachers whispered he was destined for great things. And Kunnel? His company had grown into one of the leading tech firms in Lagos, even expanding into West Africa. Newspapers called him the tech lion of Osen. Their lives continued to intersect. Too often. Too dangerously. At Temi's inter-house sports, Funk spotted them laughing together under a shade tree, their resemblance now undeniable. The tilt of their smiles. The same dimple. The same sharp cheekbones. She pulled Kunnel aside that evening. "This must stop," she hissed. "Femi will see it. The world will see it." Kunnel looked at her with quiet sadness. "Funk, how do you stop blood from recognizing blood? He knows me, even if he doesn't know why. I cannot turn my back on my own flesh." Her eyes welled up. She wanted to scream, to beg him to disappear. But part of her, deep hidden, was glad. Glad that Temi had him. The older Temi grew, the more strained the balance became. One night, after a school event, Temi asked his mother a question that nearly shattered her composure. "Mom," he said softly, "is Mr. Cunnell related to us? Like, a cousin or something?" Funk froze. "Why would you ask that?" "Because," Temi hesitated, his young face serious. "Because when I look at him, it feels like I'm looking in a mirror." Her lips trembled, but she forced a smile. "He's just a family friend, Temi. Nothing more." But deep inside, she knew the storm was no longer distant. It was circling closer, waiting for its moment. The years flew by. And soon, the day came, Temi's secondary school graduation. It was held in the grand auditorium of the school, draped with banners of blue and gold. Parents filled the seats, business tycoons, oil magnates, diplomats. Chief Femi sat in the front row, his agbada pristine, his face a mask of pride. But Funk's eyes weren't on her husband. They were on the man 2 rows behind, the one in a dark suit, watching Temi with quiet pride. Cunnell. When Temi mounted the stage to give his valedictory speech, both men leaned forward instinctively. Father and father. One in truth, one in name. Temi's voice rang out across the hall. Confident. "I am who I am today," he said, "because of those who believed in me. My teachers. My friends. And most of all, those who gave me guidance when I needed it the most." For a fraction of a second, his eyes darted to where Cunnell sat. Funk's breath caught in her throat. Beside her, Chief Femi clapped slowly, his face unreadable. And in that moment, the illusion of safety cracked. Because Temi's future had just opened its next chapter. And both of his fathers were waiting in the wings. That night, as the graduation party wound down, Cunnell found himself standing face to face with Femi in the parking lot. The 2 men locked eyes. No words, just silence heavy with years of secrets. Finally, Femi spoke, his voice low, dangerous. "You've been too close to my son." Cunnell did not flinch. "Our son." And with that, the war Funk had feared for 16 years finally began. The parking lot was almost empty. Cars had begun to stream out, headlights piercing the night air. The music from the graduation party echoed faintly behind the auditorium walls. Femi and Cunnell stood apart, yet the space between them felt electrified, like the air before a thunderstorm. Cunnell's words still lingered, sharp and dangerous. "Our son." Femi's jaw tightened. "Watch your tongue. He is mine. Whatever you think you are, whatever you think you've done, remember this. Without me, that boy wouldn't even exist in this world you worship." Cunnell held his ground. His voice was calm, almost pitying. "No, Chief. Without you he would still exist. But without me, there would be no Temi at all." It was like throwing fire into dry grass. For a moment, Femi's mask slipped. The arrogance cracked, and his shame flickered through his eyes. Because deep down he knew the truth. The one thing his empire, his agbada, his name could never change. Temi was not his seed. Funk, standing a few feet away, panicked. She stepped between them, her voice trembling. "Enough. Both of you. This is not the place." But the seed had been planted. The war lines drawn. That night, back at the mansion, Femi sat alone in his study, the glow of his whiskey glass reflecting off the mahogany table. For years he had buried the shame, paid Cunnell off, worn the mask of fatherhood, pretended that Temi's success was his triumph. But now Cunnell had returned, not just returned, but risen. Rich, powerful, respected. The kind of man Lagos celebrated. And worst of all, Temi adored him. The thought burned like acid. He poured another glass and muttered to himself, "Over my dead body will that bastard steal what's mine." In her room, Funk lay awake. Sleep refused her. She thought of the years of silence, the hidden glances, the burden she had carried. She remembered the day Cunnell walked away with 10 million naira, a young man with nothing but promise. And now, here he was, a man who had built an empire. She had never stopped thinking of him. And watching Temi glow in his presence twisted her heart with guilt and strange joy. For the first time, she asked herself, did I choose wrong? Meanwhile, Temi was no longer a boy. At 17, he felt the weight of questions he couldn't ask. Why did he feel such an unexplainable pull towards Kunnel? Why did his father, Femi, always look at him with something more than pride, something closer to resentment? Why did his mother flinch every time Kunnel's name was mentioned? He tried to bury the questions, but they grew like vines in his chest, tightening with each passing day. A week later, the inevitable happened. Chief Femi hosted a private dinner in their Ikoyi mansion, a gathering of old friends, business partners, and politicians. But among the guests, invited quietly, was Kunnel. Funk's heart nearly stopped when she saw him enter. His tailored navy suit, his calm smile, the confident way he greeted men who once would have dismissed him. It was deliberate. Femi had invited him. The night passed in formalities, toasts, and forced laughter. But underneath, tension brewed. At one point, Temi left his seat and went straight to Kunnel, chatting animatedly about school projects. The resemblance between them was undeniable. Too undeniable. Whispers began around the table. Guests exchanged knowing glances. Femi saw it. He clenched his jaw, his pride unraveling thread by thread. When the guests left, the storm erupted. Femi turned on Funk, his voice like a whip. You think I don't see it? The way he looks at that man? The way that man looks at him? Do you think Lagos society is blind? Funk tried to hold her ground. What are you saying, Femi? What am I saying? Femi roared. His hands shook as he pointed toward her. That boy is not mine. And you know it. The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time in years, the secret was spoken aloud. Funk's lips trembled. She wanted to deny it, to lie, but the strength to do so left her. Tears filled her eyes. And in that moment, Femi knew the truth he had long buried. Temi was Kunnel's son. Femi was not a man to accept defeat. He was a man of power, of wealth, of control. The next day, he called a private investigator. Dig into him, he ordered. Kunnel, I want everything. His company, his family, his secrets. Everything. If he wants war, I'll give him war. Kunnel, meanwhile, remained composed. He knew the risk of stepping too close. But the bond with Temi was no longer something he could sever. To friends and colleagues, he kept silent. But in private, he told Funk, he cannot erase me. Not anymore. And sooner or later, Temi will know. The truth always finds a way. One afternoon, while rummaging through his mother's drawer for an old photo album, Temi stumbled upon a hidden envelope. Inside, yellowing papers. Hospital documents. A birth record. His eyes scanned the lines. His heart thudded. The father's section was blank. Not Femi. Not anyone. Just blank. Confused, trembling, he confronted his mother that evening. Mum, why does my birth record not have Dad's name? Funk froze, her face pale as death. Before she could answer, the study door opened. Femi stood there, his expression stone. He had overheard. Because, Femi said coldly, I am not your father. Temi's world tilted. The walls spun. What? He whispered. Funk sobbed. Temi, please. But Femi's voice cut her off. Ask your precious Mr. Kunnel. He will tell you. The boy staggered back, his mind shattering under the weight of betrayal. And in that moment, everything they had built, the facade, the lies, the delicate balance, came crashing down. That night, Temi disappeared. His room was empty. His phone left behind. The mansion gates wide open. Funk collapsed in tears. Femi raged like a wounded lion. And Kunnel received a message in the dead of night. It was from an unknown number. Just 5 words. I think you're my father. That night, Temi vanished into the Lagos night, leaving behind only silence, questions, and fear. A mother broken, a father enraged, and a secret that could destroy them all. Kunnel now holds a message that could change everything. I think you're my father. But where has Temi gone? Will Femi's empire crumble if the truth is revealed? And what happens when the boy discovers the full story of his birth? The answers lie in part 3. Subscribe now, and don't miss the storm that is about to break.